All right, I'd like to welcome everybody to our February 26th work session for the Metropolitan School District of Posey, and we will open. Are we calling it a work session, or is this a special meeting?
It's a special meeting.
I apologize. We're classifying this as a special meeting, and we'll open this by joining me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mike, if you would, our mission and vision and
Sure.
core beliefs.
So our vision is we inspire all students to achieve their potential for learning and life in a safe and supportive environment. Our mission is we partner with our community to create a dynamic and innovative educational experience, empowering students to become educated, productive, and responsible citizens. Our core beliefs are we believe our community is vital to our educational success. Everyone is valued and treated with respect and always telling the truth. An educational opportunity for all. Student-centered programs, challenging and inspiring learning. In the pursuit of excellence, through a strong sense of pride. And our high priorities are enhancing the student experience, investing in teachers and administrators, fostering strong relationships among all, and maximizing resources.
Excellent. First item on the agenda is our patrons' concern. Do we have any? And we will mark that accordingly that we have nobody signed up for patrons' concern. New business, Mr. Gallo?
So this evening, several school boards across the state of Indiana are approving a resolution opposing House Bill 1134. And as I'm sure you've seen through Indiana School Board Association communications, this is currently in committee in the Senate. This is the bill that mainly is requiring teachers to post lesson plans online, which that has been amended to be removed from the bill. It is also requiring, curriculum, resources, links that teachers might use to all be posted on the district website in the name of transparency. As I shared this morning, some of the concerns also with this bill is mainly around that teachers must approach teaching things from an unbiased standpoint. And as you are quite aware, when you look back through American history, there are things that have happened in our past that really need to be taught that is wrong, such as racism and Nazism and those types of things. And so we're very concerned about that type of an approach. In addition to that, if our counselors are to talk to students about any type of social, emotional, mental health issues, they have to receive parental permission to do that. But if that student is in an abusive home, it creates kind of a very awkward situation there in having to get that parent permission. The other thing, I'm not sure if it was still left in the current bill or not, but anyone, and it's not just people within our community or even people within the state of Indiana, anyone across the nation can question something and with our curriculum and bring it to our attention, and we would then have to investigate it, go through all those different kinds of things. This also requires a curriculum committee to be established. Like I said, they are making amendments on a daily basis. I believe I saw yesterday over 100 people were signed up to testify at the committee meeting. I know that the Senate kind of limited the number of people that could testify. But Jeff, after following our last meeting, asked that we bring forward this resolution that, like I said, I know UBSC has passed the resolution as well, to just kind of state that we are opposed to this House Bill 1134. And I have spoken to Senator Tomes about it and expressed our concerns with him as well. So, any questions?
Well, we have to do an action on this, so we'll have to entertain a motion to formally agree and execute this resolution.
We'll make a motion to approve the resolution.
Second.
I'll second it.
So a motion by Mr. Oakley and seconded by Mr. Schmidt to approve joining the rest of several school boards throughout the state of Indiana in drafting and adopting a resolution opposing House Bill 1134. Any comments or questions regarding this?
I will say that what we have heard through the grapevine is that this is not going to make out of committee, and that more or less, I guess it goes kind of to the graveyard in summer session, more or less. So that's what we've heard, but we weren't expecting it to even get to the Senate side, and it kind of gained some feet underneath it and kept going. So
Yeah, I think we all agree that the more local control is better. And that's what we advocate for, and I think there's plenty that are asked of our staff and administrators than to add additional, which is contained in this bill. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
we'll need to make sure that we get signatures from you guys later tonight.
Absolutely.
Next up this evening, we had some HV units replaced or put in over at South Terrace, I guess about maybe 4 or 5 years ago through Performance Services. And since that time, we've experienced some issues during our humid times of the year, mainly July and August and somewhat into September. Of our pipes have been sweating really bad out there to the point of where sometimes water just kind of pouring out of the ceiling. We contacted Performance Services because of Stefanovo Group and I kind of took a look at the contract, and it was still underneath warranty. And so we approached them and kind of said, hey, can you take a look at this and see if this is a warranty issue? So what you have here this evening is a proposal from PSI for Ohio Valley Insulation to come in and do work. And mainly what they're doing is they would replace all of the insulation on the piping that they installed with those units. The additional price is us more or less correctly insulating the pipes that were existing, that were there already, more or less. And hopefully then, my understanding, and Angela and I were talking this afternoon, we feel like that this will fix the issue going forward, and we wouldn't have any more condensation, those kinds of things. We've had to replace ceiling tiles because of this and that kind of stuff. So to some extent, it's a safety issue. We want to get replaced because of the moisture in the building and stuff like that. So we have a breakdown. If you want that, I can send that to you on an Excel spreadsheet of exactly what they're going to do. Angela did a walkthrough with them. She felt like they were very thorough, and she really feels like that Performance Services is not at all kind of reneging on their situation. My understanding is, and I'm not an HVAC guy, but my understanding is that there was 2 types of insulation they could have put in with the original, and they just chose a different type than probably what was needed for the type of system that was put in. So, Angela, do you want to say anything more about?
No, I appreciate Performance Services. And they did go room by room, literally head above ceiling, took down parts and pieces as was in the spreadsheet, and I took studious notes as well, and our notes chimed in and matched up. And I just appreciate them being that thorough.
This has been a kind of a frustration. I think Aaron, I think we had over 100 pans.
There were over 100 aluminum pans up in the ceiling. They can verify that.
Yeah.
Over 100, like well over 100, that were filling up with water. Some faster than others, depending on the weather. But hopefully this will fix it. The guys were getting up there and changing the pans. If they didn't, then we would, one evening we were sitting there for an open house, and the water it just, in the main office on top of Kathy's desk, just downpoured just last week in the back of a room, coming down through a newer cabinet that was put in. So yes.
Yeah. So this is what we're bringing forward. This would come out of operations fund. But it's something that we just felt like needed to be fixed immediately. They're going to be able to do this during the spring break, which is the reason why I kind of bring this to you this evening, to kind of get it going. That way then it's fixed and ready to go for the cooling season as we go into it. So, any questions you want to ask?
Was there any damage done to other than the ceilings?
I think mainly just ceiling
Other
tiles.
than the ceiling tiles, and a few of the rooms have some carpet squares that probably need to be looked at because it's sat there for a while, but ceiling, it hits the ceiling tile and that's about it. Otherwise, we've been in the building and lucky enough to catch it to where it doesn't cause any damage.
Were these units only used at South Paradise? Have they?
I'm not sure. Damien?
Right here.
There you go. Do you know where those?
This will change their vertical units. I hadn't had any problems at the junior high.
Okay.
They're put in the 8th grade hallway.
Just curious why it was only South Terrace that had the issue.
I don't think it's the whole building either. It's just only in certain areas. Is that?
Yeah, and I'm not sure that it's the unit itself. When I walked around with them, it seemed like it was more the insulation around the pipes that was causing the issue.
Something they have to do with the ceiling and the temperature up there.
We're also going back with, it's a type of insulation that goes around the valving and things. Because over time, whenever you clean those strainers and you get into those, you potentially have to get into the valving system. They actually have a Velcro strap to them. Because otherwise what happens, even if you would fix it, they could come back and cut that insulation off to get to those necessity items to where, they're actually going back with a better type of insulation too, to where it's just a Velcro that you can take off, put back on it, retaining whatever needs to get to those spots and such.
That's what they're putting in.
So they weren't insulated, and that's what was causing this.
Right.
The other thing we were concerned about the quote is we wanted to make sure it was a hard number, that they didn't get in there and start saying, well, this needs to be done or that needs to be done. It's a hard fixed number that this is going to fix the issue.
The numbers on here is PSI's paying 17, whatever,
Yeah.
for their part.
Yeah.
And then what we have not had insulated before,
Correct.
they're gonna replace those two. Are those necessary to be replaced?
What's that?
Are they necessary to be replaced also?
Yes,
or-
that will fix the entire issue. Otherwise, you're still going to have places where it's leaking and stuff like that. Yeah.
And some of those areas, when they did that renovation, correct me if I'm wrong, but where they had tied those unit ventilator piping in, there's basically a point of connection where, there was existing versus their new. So to be fair to the contractor, it's entitled to the owner to pick up that existing line, the existing remainder of the line.
And we debated about holding off on our portion, but I just kind of felt like the more I thought about it, Michelle and I talked, we felt like they're out here. It may cost us more money in the future. We may have some more issues. Might as well just get it done now over spring break and be finished with it. So.
Entertain a motion.
I make a motion, we replace insulation by Procedure Ohio Valley Insulation as quoted us.
Second. So a motion by Mr. Colley and seconded by Mr. Bell to approve the recommendation on the South Terrace insulation project. Any other comments or questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you. That's always a hard one because nobody sees insulation. It's got to be behind the walls.
Well, they do when it falls on the ceiling.
It does. It does. Yeah, exactly right. So, the next one this evening we have is Encompassing Education Professional Development 2022-2023 contract. This is for a continuing curriculum mapping. Next year we're working on math and science, and also some mental health training for our teachers on site. This is, I'm gonna actually turn this over to Michelle because she's got kind of some information and stuff and kind of bring you up to date on some things.
So we shared the scope of work with you. This is going to be for our junior and senior high school science curriculum mapping, junior and senior high math curriculum mapping, and K through 6 curriculum mapping that we'll do during those PD days like we did this year for English. And then we'll also, way we put the calendar together, we've also included some time for some trauma-informed care training to be able to understand, some of the mental health situations that our students may be coming with us and how to address those appropriately. So this will all these are taking place during those PD days.
We've done surveys with our teachers, following a majority of these, not every single one of them, but we've had good positive feedback from our teachers on these days. They feel like that this has been good work. Larry and us were talking a little bit when we first started kind of down this road of some curriculum mapping. They had done New Harmony and stuff. I think our teachers feel like there's a direction with this. There's some follow through. There's going to be some good data that's going to come out of this as well as we move forward. In that there's kind of a sheet that the principals have to where they can actually, once that standard has been taught, to kind of assess the kids to say, did they get it? Did they master it? Did they not master it? So we feel like that this is definitely, and as well, if that HB 1134 does go through, then this allows us to be able to have the information to be able to post online for our community to have and stuff. So we feel like actually, quite honestly, the only concern that we've had from our teachers up to this point is, there's been a little bit of, well, not everybody's doing it at this point in time. They feel like that there's, our especially our K1 and 2, our elementary and kind of our middle school teachers have been hit hard with language arts and mathematics. And so, whereas some of the other curriculum areas, we haven't gotten there. They're eventually going to get there, but they haven't gotten there yet. So, but anyway, that's been about the only concerns that we've had expressed.
And most of this is was planned for ESSER 3 money.
How does this compare to the price from last year?
It's a bigger scope, so it's a little bit more money than what we did last year.
Bigger scope mean more.
More, yeah. So, but still, it's within the same
Cost per consultant that we have coming. And
yeah,
we've been very impressed with what Encompassing has provided to us.
So the areas that aren't doing the curriculum mapping, do they still attend this, or do they attend different sessions that we have set up for them?
Yeah.
So it is somewhat equitable, and the fact that we don't just have K through 6
Yes.
spending extra days when everybody else is not.
Yes, on those days, we send out the agenda a few days before of kind of what everybody's doing. And that's even bus drivers are there with training a couple hours in the morning with me. Our cafeteria workers are there for, a few hours working on training. So we really have focused this on like a culture of learning day where we're all trying to learn something.
Mm-hmm.
And so we try to put those agendas out to share kind of where everybody is going. Sometimes they get a little bit more nuanced. And so I might say, principal discretion for this time because they have several things they're working on and you don't want to make the agenda go so long, but everybody has something going on.
I've always been one not to be very much in favor of curriculum mapping in this because of the experience I had at New Harmony. But when we were there, we did not have guidance like this. We were just told we're going to do it and this is what you need. And when I spoke to teachers last year when this came up, they were pretty much in favor of it and everything. So I would like to see the survey results and stuff like that.
Sure. We can definitely get that information to you.
Entertain a motion.
I got a question here. It says these services are paid for through with a combination of, and is that the ESSER 3 funds or nothing else?
We really try to use the ESSER funds. Yeah.
And if not, the remainder would come out of
Education. Yeah.
So
But most of it we've budgeted towards ESSER. Actually, I think almost all of it we've budgeted towards ESSER.
46,000 is budgeted for ESSER right now, but there's some wiggle room in ESSER 3 right now that we. because of the Chromebook purchases and those kind of things, we need to go back and amend.
The trauma counseling, did I say that correctly?
Mhm.
That's not going to be the only other thing in addition. You'll have other activities along with that.
That's just what we're contracting with Encompassing to bring to us. So we have lots of other opportunities each time. Like this last session, I did a session on relationship building. And so we would bring lots of other opportunities to the teachers. But this is just what Encompassing is going to provide for us.
In some situations, like I know Steve and I think even Sean have had their crisis committees meet and go through their plans and things like that. I know that we also did, who was the state police officer that came in?
Clifton.
Yeah.
Clifton.
Yeah, he came in and did training on, I can't remember.
Vapes and
Vapes.
Yeah, drug awareness.
Yeah.
Officer Carter came in for the vapes as well.
So we've tried to give people a broad range of different topics. Brian Wilson did a training. We got the new virtual reality goggles, and Brian Wilson did a training for our teachers on how to use those in the classrooms and stuff. So usually sometimes there might be 2 sessions during the day. Morning session, then we'll break. We usually have lunch together, and then in the afternoon we'll have another session.
We try and train a lot of staff on CPR. Would that be something like this?
We've actually done that. We've done that as well. So the CPR, in fact, some of the teachers.
During these you have?
Yeah.
No?
Yeah. And some of our people who are curriculum mapping going like, hey, I want to go to the CPR training. So we've tried to, offer as much as we can. So, yeah. But those kinds of things is what we've tried to do. I think one of the first sessions out at the beginning of the year, there's those videos that you're required to watch every year. You remember those great ones on bloodborne pathogens, Larry. So, so we've tried to go through those with our bus drivers and things like that. So.
If I wanted to come in and observe this, would I be welcome?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure would.
I don't know if you'd be
I
welcome.
don't know
anymore.
that I want to.
And we'll put you to work, Larry. So.
Be interested.
you'll be back.
You can give us a report back.
I won't go to the curriculum mapping part.
One of the pleasures of being retired, right?
Yeah.
There we go. All right, entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the contract with Encompassing Education Professionals for professional development.
Second.
Second.
So a motion by Mr. Schmidt, seconded by Mrs. Wills to approve the professional development contract as presented by Mrs. Walden. Any other comments or questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. That motion carries.
Now we're to the good fun part. This is what I've been excited about this evening. So we're excited because we are preparing to go into preparation for our 2024 bond. And we've been doing a lot of kind of foundational work for this process to try to be as transparent as we possibly can to our community. And that's kind of why tonight we have this session, is to really kind of go through and talk about what is happening and for you guys to understand what kinds of fit situations are going to be going forward. The first part of this evening, we're going to kind of, I've invited some individuals to come in and kind of present for you what is our financial picture. What are the challenges that we are facing? Because one of the issues that we've talked a little bit about is the 2024 bond. After that happens, we almost have a 10-year window before we have another bond that comes on. And as you all know, and we've talked about tonight, our facilities are getting older. So how do we kind of bridge that gap there to make sure that our facilities stay current and up to date? So we have some options. We have some things to talk about. I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves that way, how we want to do it. So, but we're going to kind of, we've got a group here tonight from Stifle as well as Bose McKinney to kind of talk to you about the bonding process and also to talk to you a little bit about our financial picture and what kinds of options we have as we kind of move forward and stuff. So,
My understanding, and I'm new at this, but we've got a bond that we're going to retire in 2024, and then this will.
correct.
the money that we've been putting to that would be going towards,
Yeah.
towards this,
Yeah.
okay?
Because usually what you want to try to do, what school court districts try to do is to keep that tax rate level. So that's kind of what we're going to be looking at, is that whole conversation and discussion. There are certain things that can impact that, and these guys are going to kind of share a little bit about that financial picture tonight. So, yeah. Okay. Who wants to go first?
I'm up first.
All right, you're up.
Well, good evening, everybody. Chad Blacklock with Steeple. I'm gonna just let you guys pass those around. Take one. We brought hard copies, and I think.
Yeah, but maybe not. She stepped out, so
Okay.
she's hard copy.
Chad Blacklock with Steeple, my colleague Luke Brueggemann. We serve as your bond underwriting firm. So when it comes time to issue your bonds, we work on the structuring, making sure the property taxes that repay those. And we also get the bonds to market, sell them to investors, and then get you guys the money back for your project in return. Okay. So how Luke and I are going to split this up a little bit. I'm going to go over, lay a little bit of the foundation for the school finance piece, talking about tax rates a little bit that Mr. Galvin talked about. And then Luke's going to come in and really follow up with what is your current debt picture, talk about your current bond issues, when those pay off, and then talk about a 2024 issue and the impact of that to your property tax rate. Okay. So if we start with this page, and I apologize, but Luke and I realized on the way here that it's like our printer maybe ran out of ink on the way out. So bear with me on that. But this first page, I just wanted to go over really that, schools, you guys have heard this probably a million times. Schools use something that is called fund accounting. It's not like what we would use in the private sector. In fund accounting, we have to receipt certain revenues into certain funds or buckets, and only certain expenditures can come out of those buckets or funds. We simplified the fund structure immensely starting in January of 2019. We eliminated 3 or 4 different funds and created 2 new funds that, in my opinion, gave schools some flexibility in how they use their dollars. But it's also really important that now that schools really understand how to manage their cash flow. Because now we have what we call fungibility, meaning that we can shift dollars from one fund to another. And with the pressure on schools to pay teachers, pay them appropriately, have proper staffing in place, that's put a lot of pressure on the education fund, which is where we pay teachers. But also that in turn is now putting pressure on our operations fund, which we're going to talk a little bit about for you guys tonight. So if we look at that first fund where I have where it says instructional, so really our main instructional fund now is the education fund. That is funded 100% by the state, and that is that per student dollar that you guys get for every one of your students. Okay, so that's where ADM and having students in the seats is really important on count day. So you get your dollars for every one of those students, and then the expenses that come out of the instructional fund. That is 100% related to instruction. It's your principals being paid out of that fund. It's your teachers, anything really related to the instruction of a student in the building. Okay. The next fund, which is kind of that salmon color, is the debt fund. So the debt fund is where you solely repay your annual debt payments. You guys currently have a couple bond issues outstanding, and so those are paid 100% out of the debt fund. The debt fund is 98% property tax dollars. There is no state aid that goes into the debt fund. It's all property tax dollars. Then there's some other miscellaneous tax dollars like license, excise tax, and some different things like that. But 98 to 99% of the revenue in that fund is property tax. So any new bond issue you do is repaid through property tax. There's no shifting of money that can go on between the education fund and the debt fund. The revenue is the property tax revenue goes into the debt fund. It stays there. You can only make payments on your bond issues. The next fund, the operations fund, that's kind of in orange. That's a new fund starting in 2019. And the operational fund is really now the fund that in the private sector, we would talk about what your overhead expenses are. So anything that the state deems as overhead in running a school district is paid for out of the operations fund. Some examples of that would be utilities,
Your business office staff, Mr. Galvin is actually paid for out of the operations fund. Your custodians, your maintenance staff, all of those transportation, buying buses, all of that type of expenses paid for out of the operations fund. The operations fund, the first piece of the operations fund is funded out of property tax only, just like the debt fund. The reason that I hesitated a little bit with now is you see I've got an arrow going from the instructional fund over to the operations fund. The reason that I have that arrow now is this is some of the flexibility that we were given in 2019. We can actually move state money that goes into the education fund over to the operations fund. We did not used to be allowed to do that, to make that transfer back and forth. You guys are transferring some dollars over there. One of the reasons that the state is allowing us to make this transfer is because there used to be a set of expenditures paid for out of what we call the general fund, which was in place before the instructional fund, that the state of Indiana said we had to move to the operations fund. A prime example would be like Mr. Galvin's salary. He was originally paid out of the general fund. The state said you have to shift that expense over to the operations fund, along with several other expenses. When the state did that, they also said, we're going to allow you now to move revenue from the instructional fund over to the operations fund to fund the expenditures that were shifted. So this is where the flexibility comes into place, but it's also where, as I originally stated, that schools really have to monitor their cash flow now. Because there's so much pressure on the instructional fund to fund teachers, to have proper staffing, to do your curriculum mapping and all those types of things. There's so much stress in that fund now. Schools are trying to transfer the least amount as possible over to their operations fund to keep that money in the education or the instructional fund. However, what's starting to happen with some schools is they're transferring less and less and less, but the expenses in the operations fund aren't declining. Inflation, this year is at 7.1%. You think about all the expenses that are coming out of the operations fund, like I said, utilities, buses, bus tires, fuel, capital expenses, different things like that. Those are all going up in expenses or in dollar amounts, but schools are trying to transfer that over. Okay, so that's just one thing to keep in mind as we go through these next few slides and talking about your financial picture and some of your constraints as we go down this route. So again, just to kind of review, the education fund, state funded, no property tax dollars. The debt fund, property tax funded, 100%. Operations fund, primarily funded through property tax, but we can transfer that state money over to the operations fund. But we will really want to transfer the least amount as possible as we can to fund the education, right? Okay.
The state has come out and said that you have to kind of keep that below a 15% threshold now.
Yeah.
So they're trying to reduce that amount as well.
Yeah, there were some
Has to be less than 15% if you transfer from education.
15% of your total state support can be transferred, right? All right, if we go to the next slide, I really want to focus on those tax supported funds here and starting to get into, and then we'll kind of wrap this up to how when Luke gets up here talking about bringing on new debt, really how all this comes together. So I want you to look on that left-hand side where I have the debt fund in green. So your debt funds, the debt fund is a needs-based fund. And what I mean by a needs-based fund, when it comes to when you guys go through your budget process and you're calculating your tax rate and your levy for the debt fund, it is based on the need. The need for that fund is whatever your annual debt payments are, okay? And those debt payments for schools in the state of Indiana, honestly, there's no cap to that. North Posey schools can have as high a debt payments as they want to have. There's nothing from the state that says debt payments can only be X and they can't go any higher. You guys just have to understand we have to have the property tax rate and the levy in place to make those annual payments. So I just driving home the point, there's no cap to the annual payments that you want to have. You're really capped more by whatever you guys feel the appropriate tax rate is for the debt service fund because it's primarily funded by property tax. Over on the other side, the operations fund. The operations fund is a little different than the debt fund. it does actually have somewhat of a cap in place. So the operations fund, again, property tax dollars, it has a maximum levy in place. So North Posey Schools has a maximum levy that they can levy for in the operations fund. And you cannot ask the taxpayers for more dollars than that maximum levy. So if you kind of think back to transferring that money out of the instructional fund over the operations fund, your instructional fund revenue is really capped by the number of students. The operations fund is really capped by this max levy that North Posey Schools has in place, okay? So you can't say, well, this year for the operations fund, we need $5 million instead of the $3 million that we had last year. You cannot go above that max every year. Now that max levy does grow every year by a factor that we call the MLGQ, which is the maximum levy growth quotient. That factor is the same for the most part for every school in the state. Now, the concept behind that is when we talked about inflation and the things you're paying for out of the operations fund, as that inflation goes up and expenses go up, the idea is that your levy needs to go up every year to help fund some of those operational fund expenses. Does that make sense? So, however, this year, that MLGQ growth, they were able to raise your levy in the operations fund in 2022 by 4.3% over 2021. However, inflation is 7.1%, so we're not really keeping up with that rise in inflation. So again, you just think that through and think back to transferring the money from the instructional fund. It's finding that balance in that transfer back and forth. So the debt fund capped, the levy is capped at whatever the school board you guys deem your debt payments to be. The operations fund is capped by your maximum levy, and it grows every year by the MLGQ. Okay, so you can't bring any more revenue into the operations fund other than that MLGQ growth. The tax rates from those two funds feed into your total tax rate for the school district. And Luke's going to show you in graph form what that looks like for you guys and what it would look like bringing on a new debt payment. So when we look at your debt and we look at your total tax rate, we kind of look at, okay, what is that operations fund doing? And we're going to assume that you guys are bringing on that new MLGQ growth every single year. So you're taking that increase that's coming from the state to help fund those operational expenses. And then we layer on the debt on top of that when we look at your total tax rate to have that conversation. Does that make sense for everybody before we move on? Okay. All right. So if we go to the next slide, let's talk a little bit more really about that MLGQ growth. So in the operations fund. So again, your total tax rate is the summation of the tax rates for the debt fund, operations fund, and really the variables that are impacting those tax rates are levies and assessed value. You guys have no control over the assessed value piece. That's whatever the assessor really assesses your property at. So the only thing that you have control over in the equation is the levy amount. So again, we're assuming you're taking that max levy every year in the operations fund, and then that's where we come to talking about what do you want the levy to be in your debt fund to fund your debt issuances. Okay. So again, sorry.
Well, I was going to say that assessed levy, the assessed valuation is a factor of growth or decline in population. So if we have more rooftops coming in or newer rooftops coming in, we have a higher assessed value.
That is correct.
If we have older rooftops or shrinking rooftops, we're going to have a lower assessed value.
That is correct.
And in our case, we have a lot of farmland and not a lot of commercial